Hey, this is Mike Shea from slyflourish.com and twitter.com/slyflourish. And I am here on the DM's Deep Dive right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. And I am here with my longtime friend, Sharon Dudley. And we are going to talk today about how to make D&D more accessible for the visually impaired. Sharon, would you please introduce yourself?
Okay, I am Sharon Dudley, and I've been playing D&D for 30 years. It's a really long time. And I've played Champions, I've played Vampire, I've played Mage, I've played a lot of role-playing games. So hopefully I'll be able to answer Mike's questions today.
And you've recently got into the Game Master seat, is that right?
You mean GMing?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I started with my safety zone, which is kids, and it worked pretty well. And I've done a few times GMing for adults, which to me is much harder.
So we'll get to that in a bit. I want to hear some of your experiences on that. So with every show, I like to start off with what are the I like to start off with like 3 tips that the guest can kind of offer to the audience right up front. So in case nobody wants to listen to us talk for an hour, but they actually want to get something out of the show, they can get it right away.
Sure.
So what are the top 3 things DMs can do to make our games more accessible to players who are blind or otherwise visually impaired?
I would say you don't need boards. You don't need the grid boards. If you just use descriptive vocabulary, that really helps. And the second thing I would say is for blind people, pictures aren't very helpful.
Right. So
I know that's sort of an obvious thing, but you would be surprised. So if you had visually impaired people at the table or a blind person at the table, you really, the picture is sort of useless. It's just a rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I would say is don't use the words this and that when you're holding up things because it's very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sighted people tend to say those words a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about this, and then the blind person is thinking, what in the world? I don't know what this is. What is this? What do you have in your hand? So those are my 3 top tips.
Right. Gotcha. I had the opportunity to talk with another, I think he's visually impaired, not fully blind, D&D DM. And he and I were talking back and forth on Twitter, and he brought up something that, I mean, you and I have played D&D together for 15 years. And I was embarrassed by the fact that he brought up this tip, which I don't think I have ever done, which was ask, like, how can I make, when you come to the game, how can I make the game better for you? Right. Because the reality is I might not know. Right.
I think that's a great tip instead of assuming what you can do for a person with a disability. Because sometimes we just do things in different ways. And I find that I love it when people ask. I'm not offended at all. And different people need different strategies and different things. So you might have a person that needs Braille notes. You might have a person that can really picture the grid board very well. I just have trouble with that. I'm more into the theater part of games and role playing. Yeah, as you well know, Mike.
Yes, as I well know. Our audience doesn't know, but I know.
Yes, the audience doesn't know, but I love the theater aspect.
Sure.
Of role playing.
Yeah.
The storytelling.
Yeah. The second story girl.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh, that was so great.
Crazy. Yeah.
Hey, it's an inside joke no one else is gonna get.
I know,
Chris will get
right?
It. And Michelle will get it. So you and Chris also go to many game conventions, right? I know you go to Dragon Con pretty regularly. We've all met up at Origins, I think last year, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've had a good opportunity to play in a wide range of games from a wide number of game masters.
Yes.
What were some of the games that went particularly well for you? I mean, from the point of view of someone who's blind, what DMs handled it particularly well and made the game really fun?
Well, I think some of the things that make a game really fun for me are the same things that make a role-playing game fun for everyone. A good plot, a great GM, somebody that is really bringing the characters and the setting to life. Mm-hmm. There are definitely certain things that could help for me. I love it personally when GMs use music. Mm-hmm. I just think that sets the tone for the game. And I know this great GM that uses music a lot. Okay, it's Mike.
Yeah, I was going like, yay me.
Yes, yeah. And other GMs that I've played with have used music, and I mean, it could be because I was a music major in school, so maybe that's why I love music so much. But I just think if it's lightly playing in the background, it makes a huge difference. I think that if there are certain things that definitely take away from the experience, but I think if the GM is really giving a lot of choices, whether you're sighted or not sighted, if you have an idea for your character and the GM is just having you roll dice and not giving you sort of an open road to make your own choices, that detracts. Mm-hmm. For from my point of view.
Sure.
I think also the pacing, if that kind of connects to what I just said, but if you feel too rushed, feel like things are dragging too much. I sense sometimes that people are on their phones during D&D games, mm-hmm. and a lot of the role-playing games that I've played, and that just bothers me because I'm really attentive and I'm trying to follow the plot of the story, and when people are on their phones, and I don't know, you'd have to tell me how it is for sighted folks, but because I can hear when somebody's head is pointed down,
yeah,
and I guess I just like it when everybody is present at the table.
They could be praying.
Oh yeah, I suppose they could be
with their heads
but
down.
I think they're on their phones because I usually hear beeps.
Probably more likely.
So I guess just having the whole group be focused,
right,
along with the game master. Mm-hmm. So because we're all giving up our time, mm-hmm. to be together and play. So
be there.
So yeah, be present.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up an interesting thing which I'd been thinking about. I did web development work early on in my career and still tinker around with the web these days. And at the time, there was a big push for web accessibility guidelines, in particular, particularly making the web something that screen readers could read well, mm-hmm. Rather than just visually, be visually displayed. And at the time, the web was young, and websites were terrible at it. Like, people were misusing a lot of things in how they designed a page that completely screwed up screen readers. And I came to an interesting conclusion studying it for a while, which was building a website that's good for accessibility made the website better for everybody, whether they were using those or not. And you kind of hit on the same thing with a game. Like, the things that will make a game good for, someone who's blind or visually impaired makes the game good, period. we want the same things. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, as we talk more, there are some exceptions. So, for example, some GMs have a screen, or not a screen, but a board where they'll put the initiative order.
Yeah.
And if a GM doesn't tell me that it's my turn out loud, or give me some sign that it's my turn. Now, usually I can also watch who is going before me, but if the order is changing from round to round, that can become confusing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, particularly with initiative, we've kind of gone through, or I've personally gone through different systems. So like there was that Pathfinder initiative board that was very popular. First of all, people used to write it down on a piece of paper, and then like that Pathfinder initiative board came out that had little magnetic nameplates, and you could kind of sort the nameplates. I'm sure Chris has one of those, and people would use that. But the problem is that people couldn't see when their order of initiative was. Right. So we went to things like table tents or cards that sit over the top of a DM screen with the intention that people at the table could see where they are. But if you can't see, we're just as we're in the same spot as the Pathfinder board. So so it just helps if the GM says your character name. I have to remember that. Like I don't, it again never occurred to me that I should say something like, Sharon, just so you know, Rob goes right before you. So when you hear Rob go, you're next.
Well,
something simple as that could help, right?
Yeah, I haven't had a problem at your game.
No, and I've never noticed a problem.
Yeah, you've always said, you'll either say like, right now we're going in a circle, or right now you passed out the cards, and then like somebody will just say, oh, you go fourth in the order. So, and because I'm not on my phone and I'm paying attention.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Probably better than most. Yeah, and the phone thing's interesting too. I've there's many different opinions about what to do with phones, and I've been of the I lean towards the idea, similar to what you said, which is people are spending their time and energy to come to a game. And my feeling is like, if it's their time and their energy and they want to spend it playing a clicker game on the phone, okay. But I do recognize that it can actually hurt the experience for other people at the table, not just themselves. Yeah. If they're distracted and it's their turn and they don't know what's going on. So it's a tricky thing to deal with. And I think some are more, some have a heavier set of rules for that. Sort of like, hey, everybody put your phone in a jar, like your biker gang. Yeah. And others, I tend to let it, just I tend to let people kind of do whatever they're going to do, but that's tends to be my style in everything in life.
Yeah, I mean, when I've gone to teacher conferences or workshops, instructor, I'm sorry, I can't speak tonight. The instructor will usually say, look, just try to be present here with me. Hopefully I'll be interesting enough, sort of bring some light humor into it. And I like that approach. But then also saying, if you have an emergency and have to take a phone call, because we all have lives outside of the game, maybe. I'm not sure.
I don't. Yeah, but I'm sure there are some that do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Good point.
So what are some? I've heard a couple stories from you guys over the years, but there's probably some other ones. Having played in all of these games, what are some of the games that went particularly poorly, and why and how?
Okay, well,
that's Chris's game. Don't bring up how.
No. I won't. He's in the room. My husband's in the room, so I'm not going to.
Oh, he's there.
Yeah,
hey,
he's
Chris.
here.
Hi.
Left.
He's just sort of lurking at the moment. Yeah. So, well, let me just tell you, for D&D, 4th edition was really hard. No, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I know exactly why.
Because of the board was always changing, and the push and the pull, and
And shift and slide.
I was utterly confused. It was, and I started not wanting to play when fourth edition was very in vogue. Right. I just didn't want to do it. And I think we did sort of take a break for a little while, and we were playing things like Dragon Age and some other.
Why we played Pathfinder?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when did you guys start playing Pathfinder? Was it right around that time?
I think it was. I think it was because I was having difficulty with knowing where my character was. And I was having other people move the miniature. And I just felt like I was really good at role-playing and really good at D&D specifically. And then 4 came out, and I just thought, I don't understand this. This is too much moving. I don't know where to go. I can control their people, but I don't want to control their movement. So it was just... Yeah, I just didn't like it. I thought, it's just not my particular style.
It wasn't many people's particular style. You're not the only one.
I don't know. I just felt that it just wasn't for me, and not that for others it wouldn't be a good system. Also, I was discussing this earlier with Chris, and we were talking about Cortex. And just the character sheet, and you have different dice for every pool, your pool, and you'd have a 12-sided dice for stats, and then you'd have a 10 for another thing, and then you'd have an 8 for this weapon, and it was really challenging to, especially at a convention, to play my character, and Chris was also playing. My husband was also playing at the same time, and then
if I can comment on that, on every one of her turns, I had to read the entire character sheet to her because she had to pick an ability from each dice.
I had to pick, and then so I mean, I got through some of those games, but they weren't as fun. And I remember one time at Origins, I felt really bad. We left a game, and it was I just remember it was a D&D style game. Maybe it was just something a little homebrew and maybe based on a 20-sided die. But what happened was the GM gave a word problem. And you really had to see it to figure it out.
Right.
And there were a few other things in that game, but I finally said to Chris, I'm just not having fun. So we apologized to the I think it was a married couple, GM and his wife, and and we just left. And it wasn't them. It was just that it was just too hard.
Right. I think I remember this story, and I think one of the things is, like, you asked, are there more of these? And they're like, yeah, there's a whole lot.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't really sit here watching everybody solve a cipher.
Yeah. And I mean, cipher is really, really boring.
Yeah, right.
I was trying. Chris and I were talking about this. Did you have another? If something is scrambled or anything that would include, like, looking at words,
right,
and moving things around to figure out a code, is tricky.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend not to throw puzzles like that into my game as much as I used to, and
I think that's one of the reasons why 15 years ago it was harder.
Yeah, but one of the things that I've done since is that there's alternative ways to deal with it, right? Yes. Like you can have one can have a cipher, but there's beyond people that can't see it, which sucks completely. Yeah. There are people who just hate ciphers. Right? They just don't want to do it anyway. And you're like, well, maybe rolling a check helps you understand some of it. How would you? But I think that idea of, like, well, how would you have thinking about it from the point of view of a DM, if I took that cipher and I said, I'm going to flip this upside down, and now they have to solve it, right? They have to solve it without looking at it. How would they do so, right? And then it wouldn't be looking at it, right? It would have to be, well, they have to come up with some other way, right? Some other
20 questions.
Clues. 20 questions, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
like a room filling up with something, and if you don't get it in a certain number of questions, then you die. Wow, I went there, Mike. I went straight to death.
That's what we do. You're in a GM seat, so
I know. Scary.
How about so obviously, like, visual, there's a couple visual puzzles I've used in the past. There's one called the Mastermind puzzle, which is based on the game Mastermind. There's another one, the solving ciphers is another one that I'm sure comes up. Are there what kind of puzzles are there types of puzzles that work particularly well? Types of puzzles that you tend to run into in RPGs that you like?
Well, we had what's the Sherlock Holmes game that we have that I like?
We have several. But can you remember the Baker Street?
Baker Street for Sherlock Holmes. And you get you roll dice, and then you get a certain number of clues. And then some of the clues are true, and you can find out which clues are true and which clues are false. But that one works for me. And there's just a lot of role playing.
It's sort of like deduction. By gathering pieces of evidence, you can figure out which clues are not true.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Interesting.
So I really like that. Trying to think of what other kinds of puzzles.
You're given a clue, and then you're given 3 conclusions that are drawn from it, and you roll dice to eliminate those conclusions.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really cool game. I'm thinking about other. So you're saying specifically puzzles, which
riddles. Obviously, I would think that riddles are a relatively good form of puzzle that we can throw into our game. I always try to think of like other things that we can put into our game that are beyond rolling dice or fighting something, or beyond kind of role playing. But you come to a big door and you want something that's keeping that big door closed that isn't a athletics check.
Yeah.
And riddles are an obvious one. Bell lock.
Well, I'm trying to think. Like some of the things in Labyrinth, when when has the situation with the knockers, the handles of the door.
I should have watched it because I knew you reviewed it on the show.
Oh,
but I haven't.
Just things where you can ask questions to creatures that talk. I like things like that. And just trying to figure out if somebody's telling you the truth or if they're lying to you, which I never thought of, but it's kind of similar to the Baker Street game.
Yeah, that's actually really so. Probably one of the biggest thing that's changed my own game is that the majority of my preparation for a game is now in writing down these things I call secrets and clues. And when I'm running a game, I'll start by saying, where's the game going to begin? And I'll be doing this for the game that you guys are coming to on Saturday. Okay. What are the 10 things that you guys might learn during that session, right? And I typically don't put in lies. Right? They're typically true things.
Yes.
I could have false things in there.
Right.
And that would be kind of interesting. Like, what would be some false rumors? Now, I'd probably say like, this is false, but you might learn it anyway. And that idea of having sort of a variety of different things that could or couldn't be true, and then being able to pick up the pieces of evidence that tell you whether they are or aren't, feels like a really neat puzzle. I'll have to think about that.
As you were just talking, Mike, I thought another thing that I really like is when the GM uses different voices. In my husband's game, we went to hell. And I can say, literally, we went to hell.
Literally.
And my character was talking to a lawyer in hell, and Chris did this voice. Maybe I can get him to do it right now.
Do it, Chris.
Come on, Chris. We do.
Well, I tried to do a combination of Christopher Walken and Quark.
Yeah. Did you hear what he said? Christopher Walken and
yeah,
Quark.
I have my own mic here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
Well, what you need to do is process the proper paperwork.
And I loved it. I can't even begin to tell you.
And get more cowbell.
No, he didn't say that. But it was so much fun for me just talking to this lawyer in hell. And it was so much fun because I really felt like I was there. Now, okay, maybe I'm a little crazy, but...
Well, that's why we play these things, so we feel like we're there.
I really did. And it was the sense of danger. And, Chris was also describing the scent. And see, I don't know if people do that very often for sighted folks. But I don't know. I think about those things a lot. Also because, I'm a kindergarten teacher. So I'm also always thinking about how to make things very five senses for the kids.
Right.
So when I GM, I want to include as much of that as possible, sort of talking about, well, is it a windy day? Is it rainy? How does it feel? What's the ambiance? What does it smell like in the bar? It's just, does it have like a stale beer smell? Or I don't know. I tend to think of those things.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's a good one.
If you use that with your gaming group, it could only add that the vibrancy and the richness to the game that a lot of people really like.
Yeah, so this is one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, and you hit on a good piece of it, which is how obviously written descriptions don't work. So describing what are the things that help you, quote unquote, visualize an area. And smell being a good one, right? Like that's a really good example of something that I could put in there. That works.
That's a great question. I mean, if when we were doing the castle, it's on the the vampire. I can't think of his name. Ravenloft.
Strahd. Yep.
Yes. I remember one time, you just described the fog, and you described it in a few sentences, and it was just such a rich description, and you were just saying that it was so thick, and you couldn't see but a foot.
I only did that so everybody had advantage.
Oh, okay. And it was, but that kind of description, that it was cold and wet, and then and just the darkness and the feeling of hopelessness. Yeah, I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I'm saying? I'm just describing a feeling of hopelessness and how fun that was. But
sure.
But it is fun when you could bring in as many of the senses as possible.
Texture.
The
oily, slimy texture.
Yeah, the oily, slimy,
dripping down the pillar.
Cold. And I think it was also another game of yours with the wine. Was it a wine?
Yeah, the cellar. Yep. The wine. It was a like a wine pudding.
Yeah.
I think we called it a wine golem. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I think I caught on to it pretty, maybe even sooner than the other people, because you were describing the smell of the room. So see, Mike, you did that.
Excellent.
You did it.
I'm so glad I do it just instinctively.
Instinctively, yes. I think also, so beside voice, like the tone of voice, the sort of going louder and softer, and serious, or when you're in the bar and you're having a good time, and you get little bits of, like, the GM will say, oh, and there's, two people in the corner, and they're, really listening to the music played by the bard, and then there are these, boisterous guys wrestling in the other, at another table, and just when I like it when like men try to do female voices and women try to do male voices. Mm-hmm. I think that's really cool, and mm-hmm. And it's hard to do, but I think it just adds to the experience, and again, I think it would add to anybody's role-playing experience.
Right. Sure.
Just makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
And and then people will put down their phones. See, so that connects
right.
to the first thing. Back in college, many years ago, Chris and I both played with a really great GM, and he really did all of that. And he really got into, I think he had a lot of backstories for a lot of the characters in his game. So they had a lot of deep, you could kind of tell when he was speaking that they weren't two-dimensional, that mm-hmm. they were well thought out villains. Mm-hmm. I like well thought out villains. When, you know what I'm saying, when the people have reasons for what they do.
Right.
And we've been watching, I don't know if you've ever watched Outlander.
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, there's a character, Captain Randall. He's really evil, Mike, but he's to me, he's evil, but he's really very deep, and he has a lot of different motivations for why he does the evil things that he does. Mm-hmm. So
those are always the best villains.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys seen Black Panther yet?
We have not.
Oh, it's
good.
Yeah.
I want to. We've just been.
It's another one with a villain where you're like, I don't know, it's not hard for me to agree with this guy. Yeah. Like I think he's got good points.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to go and see it and then let you know. I think as you were speaking also, sound effects. So I knew I was talking earlier about music, yeah. But I also like sound effects.
Like actual sound effects, not me making sounds with my mouth. Right?
Well, you could, but there are definitely you can get sound effects like a crashing window.
Yeah.
Or a slamming door, or footsteps, and not that I want to add work for GMs, but it just adds to it. Yeah. And if most GMs have their computer right there, and it's just neat, it kind of brings you more into the story.
Yeah, I've never done it. I've seen a lot of soundboards, and I think like a lot of apps, a lot of devices have soundboard software. And yeah, I've always been like, man, I'm too busy. I got too many things going on. But it's
sure.
Kind of neat. Yeah.
Yeah, but since we're doing this, I might as well just say my game that would get top ratings would have the music, the sound effects, the character voices, the GM saying, okay, it's your turn, Chardrin, or whoever I'm playing that, and really making the whole story come alive.
Right.
With those things.
I know that you. Well, let me ask and make sure, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. You tend to prefer role playing. If we look at 5th edition and its 3 pillars: role playing, exploration, and combat. Mm-hmm. You tend to prefer role playing certainly over combat. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say it's an accurate statement.
Yeah. And you were not alone. In surveys I ran, it was 2-to-1 over combat for almost everyone. Like, I
like combat too. I mean, there's no greater satisfaction in life than than killing a hag or a demon or crushing your enemies with your sword, or totally tearing apart a minotaur or an abomination. Right. I mean, I love that too, but I think that you could also play. Sighted people can play a computer game for that. I really can't, but sometimes if I've had a really hard day at work, with my 5-year-olds, God, I want to kill something. That doesn't sound right, Mike.
That's okay. It's just you and me and Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's only forever.
No. I just mean that, it's a stress reliever. It's good sometimes just to, it's purely fantasy. I don't really want to kill people, but sometimes I'll just say, God, I really want to kill a monster right now.
Right.
And I want to do it like in a couple hits.
Right.
So,
so you mentioned that, the obviously having a board and a bunch of minis running around is not that useful, and I having been a firm veteran of 4th edition, I was very used to running minis on a grid, and now since 5th edition came out, I now oscillate between them. Right, I use them both, but I love Theater of the Mind for many reasons. I love how dynamic it is. I love how fast it is to get into it and out of it. I love the things that people can do in it that you can't represent with a mini on a 2-dimensional plane. What are the aspects of so I know that what are the things that really work well when people are running combat in the Theater of the Mind? What are ways that you've seen that work really well when somebody's running Theater of the Mind? Is that a fair question?
It's a fair question, but then it brought up something that you didn't ask me.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah, start with your thing.
Okay. I cannot stand it when people are drawing out rooms. Oh my God, it drives me crazy. It drives me absolutely crazy. And actually, Mike, I'm not even thinking about your game because I'm playing like 5 games right now.
Right.
With 5 different groups. And forgive me, Ben's gonna know, but I love Ben as a GM. But when he's drawing out the rooms, I know it's helpful for the sighted people, but it just, for me, it takes so long to draw out that room, and I just think to myself, and you don't need this.
Yeah, for everyone else, there's at least the benefit of seeing a room at the end. And for you, it's like, it's no different than if you didn't
No, it's
have,
no different. It's exactly the same for me. So it's really like,
you just killed 5 minutes of my time.
Who is stinking, and it's more than 5 minutes, because then, people are arguing about the dimensions and, well, you have to draw this closet.
Right.
Oh my freaking, I'm sorry. So, but you said the question was, the original question was what?
So when people are running, so Theater of the Mind has in my, first of all, I think now that they've handled encounter building in 5th edition by adding better rules in Xanathar's Guide, totally separate topic. Okay. I feel like the one thing that is missing from 5th edition that I feel like they could really embrace and do something about is better guidelines for DMs to run Theater of the Mind combat. Many of the designers that run D&D have said they run Theater of the Mind. They like it. Chris Perkins, in the game that's one of the most popular RPGs streamed on the internet, if not the most popular, probably the second most. I think Critical Role's pretty good. He runs Theater of the Mind, but they don't really tell you how to do it.
Right.
So when you've seen people doing it, what are the characteristics that have made it work well for you, and then where does it kind of fall apart?
Those are excellent questions.
And I didn't prepare you with those either. So
no, it's okay. I like options. I like it when a GM sets up a room, for example, and tells you, let's just talk about a bar, for example. I like it when the GM will say, okay, you have your bar, and you have your there's a gigantic open fireplace. This fireplace is so when we think of fireplaces now, we think of our fireplaces that are in our living rooms, if we have one. But in inns and castles, a fireplace would be much, much larger. Mm-hmm. So I just like details, and when the original description of the room is described, sort of saying, there's people playing cards, there's a bar, there's the waitresses, there's the cook, or the owner of the inn, so you have options, and you can kind of approach who you want to. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
That and I like how I think that I have the most fun when during a session, when you're taking turns and everybody can sort of do their own thing. Okay, if you want to play a card game, you can do that. If you want to go and listen to the bard and meet somebody, you can do that. Or you can even have a romantic interlude with somebody. Mm-hmm. I mean, to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. in the game. The time that you let me, we saved when I was playing the large female fighter.
Yeah.
And then she saved the life of the guy that was in the stocks, and
right,
then
right, yep.
and how they kind of developed that romance. And she said, well, I need a man that's tougher than me.
Right.
and then you kind of went with it, and you said, okay, well, so are you saying that you guys would actually spar? And I said, absolutely. And you allowed that. And then later we had our, not you and I mean,
the characters had a tryst.
Yeah. The characters had a tryst. And then I had to, we had our night in our tent, and then the next day we just kept adventuring. I went off with my party and left my new husband behind.
Oh, right. You had to take care of things in the house. Yeah. I love that. I loved exploring that, and it was really that was awesome. That was the Icewind Dale Legacy of the Crystal Shards campaign. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And
so we like to take questions from the audience. We had some people on Twitter earlier that posted some questions. We've got folks in Twitch right now who have had a few questions, and we have our guardian angel, Alex Basso, who manages all of that. Alex, do you have any questions for us tonight?
Yeah, we have a few. First, I'm going to start with one from Twitter. This is from Jen at Pixelscapes. And she asks, what's the best way to handle text-dense character builds like wizards or clerics who need to make spell choices on the fly? Is it just a lot of reading and memorization ahead of time?
Sharon, what do you think?
Wow. I think that's more for the GMs,
Do you find yourself gravitating towards certain types of characters because of that?
Wow. I love playing rogues, and especially now. And I can't even tell you why. I guess I just like, because I like building personalities, and I like playing rogues that, everybody's going to think that, oh, they're going to steal stuff from the party. And I never do. I like to play opposite that stereotype. Mm-hmm. And so I like to play the rogue hero. It's just a type that I like. And I like paladins. I 30 years ago, I would have told you that I liked clerics the best. So, you sort of I like also playing things that I've never played before. So I right now I'm playing a warlord in one game, and I'm playing a tiefling rogue in another game, and I'm playing a paladin in one of your games.
Well, how do you memorize your paladin spells though?
I just have them memorized. I, for me personally, I'm not that into playing wizards, but you could braille the cards. You could. It would depend on your level of commitment to the game,
right?
Just like anything.
Like a cleric in particular would be tough. It would seem like, because you have to memorize every spell. Like, it's not even the ones that you're going to prepare.
You could
or at least get the gist of them all, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you used Jaws, you could have it on. Oh, it's a screen reader. Sorry. So it's talking to you. So if you had, one earphone in and you needed to quickly, it would just depend. Like, are you really tech savvy? If you had a phone that talked to you, you could use that. I'm older, so I'm not as tech savvy as, some of the younger people that I play with. But I would probably braille my spells when I GM. If I want notes, I just braille them.
Right.
So I hope that answers that question.
It does, yeah. And one of the things I had heard from I can't remember if the same person or another DM or GM who's visually impaired, who said that, and this is a shameless plug for D&D Beyond. I am now officially a D&D Beyond shill. D&D Beyond is the web version of all of the D&D books, and they are not just in PDF; they're actually in text and HTML. And what this other DM said is that made the game go from inaccessible for a DM to accessible. Okay. Like now, as a DM, he's like, finally, I can read stat blocks for monsters, like I couldn't before.
Oh yeah, that's great.
So that was sort of a, probably not unintended, but it was an effect of D&D Beyond that many of us didn't consider, right? Mm-hmm. That suddenly there's people who could not, because you get a monster manual, it's 300 pages, and it's not in any accessible format. Mm-hmm. Alex, what other questions do you have?
Okay, one from James in Tricasso in Twitch.
Is he allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, he got every now and then.
He got the filter.
Yeah.
All right.
He happened to get through.
He is the boss. Go ahead and let him.
How can digital tools be accessible for everyone?
Huh?
Well, and you started answering that, Mike.
A little, yeah. So, but you've been playing in other ones, particularly in Pathfinder. Are there what tools have helped you navigate Pathfinder?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. So I have to be honest. I don't use. Don't laugh at me, please. I'm afraid to say this. I don't use screen readers. I use my husband to read.
That is the most expensive screen reader.
I know. I feel really bad saying that, but because I work full time and I'm also going to school, I just don't have. I mean, I want to play, and for me, it's just and I do apologize for saying that. I could be a lot more independent with screen readers. But I use my husband because we both play D&D, and I just say, I want to hear about this monster, or I want to hear about that. And he's so wonderful that he'll read whatever I want.
Yeah, one of the things. So you were on Tabletop Babble with a friend of the show and the previous questioner, James Indracasso. And I've known you guys 15 years, and we've been playing forever. And there was an aspect of your relationship that I didn't know about, which is that when you were in college and you were dating folks, one of the requirements was that they had to be a role-playing gamer. Like you're like, I don't want to marry, I don't want to go out with just anybody. It's got to be a role-player.
Yeah, it really was. It was just because it was a passion, and I felt so strongly about it that, I think everybody that I dated in college actually either played or was a GM.
Yeah. Well, as someone who has also married a heavy role playing addict, we know how good that can be.
It can be very good. Yes.
Yeah. Alex, what other questions do you have?
Okay, here's one from Shortman Ian in Twitch. What easy accommodations do DMs overlook? What is the simplest thing they can do to make their tables more inclusive?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I think it is too. Going back to the very beginning, very, very simple. Just say the person's name. I have trouble sometimes in a group of people. I don't always know if somebody's for sighted people, you know somebody's talking to you when they look at you, but I can't see that. So
Right.
if somebody's asking, so what do you think? How does a blind person know if that person's, so what do you think? Are they talking to you? Are they talking to the person to the left of you? Are they talking to the person to the right of you? Are they talking to their wife? Are they talking to their kid?
They talk to themselves.
Yeah, they could be. So what do you think? I don't know. What do I think? But just simply saying the person's name or a character name.
That's really good. Yeah.
And you just have to practice doing that. But it's a really easy, quick fix that will make the person feel so much more at ease.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, I mean, thinking back on it, yeah, it's hard because it's like an instinct, wired into us that, when we make eye contact, that's sort of a connection that's there, and it's not there.
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting thing to be more conscious of.
And I know that sighted people have difficulty when you go into Starbucks now and somebody's like, "Hi, how are you?" And sighted people have told me they don't when they have the ear thing.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about, and I have been with sighted guides, and I've said, "Are they talking to us?" And the person I'm with says, "I don't think so."
They don't know either.
They don't know either. I think they're on their phone, and and then they'll say, "Yeah, they're on their phone."
Yeah.
So, and usually if you wait a moment, you'll find out. But it just makes it so much easier when you're and there's also that connection too when you say the character name of the person. That draws you into the story because then you feel more like the character. Mm-hmm. So it's helping in several ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alex, what else do you have?
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more from Twitter, and this was from Richard J. Compton. Just a simple question. He wants to know, what was your first D&D memory?
Mine. Chris is laughing. Because I still, it was a bad one.
Oh no.
I was very young and I was playing with a whole group of guys, and I
don't like this story already.
And I knew no, it's nothing bad. It's nothing bad. I was playing a cleric, and I had a very rich backstory. And at the time, in this guy's world, all the gods were dead. But my character had such a strong belief in her god that she turned her back on a whole army of hobgoblins, and they shot her. And she really thought that she would survive. She did die. Now she was brought back later on, but I think that's and I can't believe I did that. Like looking back, it was really great for role playing purposes. But I just embarrassed myself so bad, and I wish there was a TARDIS that I could just hop in, go back to that game, and be the player that I am now, and just really, sort of like when you say there's really no right or wrong in D&D, but there are things that get super embarrassing.
There's things that are real close to wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, but everybody's got stories like that, right? Like my first D&D campaign that I ran, I had I was the DM, and I had two characters that I controlled who got all the stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like the default of awful. Right. And Mike Merles talks about how his D&D campaign was them going through the monster manual from A to Z.
Oh my gosh.
So everybody's got these stories of
Wow.
You know, or like we didn't have a D20, so we just rolled a D12 the whole time, and none of us knew why we could never hit anything.
Oh my gosh.
You know? So all that kind of, you know, it's just yeah, it's great stuff. Everybody's got stories of their first RPG experience. So I bet you. I wonder, and I've been fascinated. One of my many recent obsessions, my obsession with the shifting demographics and the shifting attention that D&D is getting these days. And I wonder if we're going to see stories like that, because now there's so many examples of D&D that people can watch before they ever start to think about running it, that they're gonna get past some of these things where like, we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Right.
Like no one knew what the hell they're doing. Well, now there's lots of examples people can look at before they start that we never had.
See, but the crazy thing is that now I would do that purposely, but I would do it with knowledge. You know what I'm saying? I would do it to be playing kind of such a believer, you know, almost a what's the word when you're really very zealot. I mean, and she was just a zealot, and at the time, I remember the god too. It was Isis. I totally believed in Isis, and I had full 100% faith, and I actually brought the god back to life once my character came back to life, and it was crazy. But yeah, I wish I could just go back and apologize to all the guys sitting at the table and go, look, I'm sorry, I didn't know anything then. You know, I'm a much better player now.
Right.
But I do crazy stuff now too, and
that's always
you know,
great, though.
My husband could definitely swear to that I do crazy stuff.
Alex, we have time for one more question.
I think that's pretty much it for this week.
All right. Let me see if I've got any final questions. Let me go in my little list here. We talked about that. Visualizing. Let me ask one last question. You mentioned. Oh my God, there's a alarm going off, and I don't know where my phone is. There it is. Sorry about that. So.
Great sound effect, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
I like that.
That's how pros do it.
Yeah.
So. Not that you're not a pro. I bet you have phones that go off all the time in your games, in your shows.
Just dogs.
Just dogs. Yeah.
I mean, I have that too.
Just our two dogs. Yeah.
You mentioned like I thought it was actually fascinating. I'm not, you know, I have friends that have worked on Cortex, and I'm very sorry to say it, but I'm not a fan of Cortex either for a lot of the not exactly the same reasons, but one of my reasons is like, here's all these really articulate dice you ought to roll, and really we're just taking the top two. So it's like I pretty much could have rolled anything. So that was, but it was interesting to hear like why Cortex as a system doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Are there game systems that you've played that worked particularly well for you? Maybe better than D&D 5e or Pathfinder.
Dragon Age.
Yeah.
And what's the Q one?
Quags.
Quags.
I haven't even heard of that one.
Oh,
Quick ass gaming system.
System, but it was
it's kind of like Fate.
Yeah, it is kind of like Fate. Yeah,
Fate would seem like one that would work particularly well, but I wasn't sure if that was.
Yeah, Fate is lovely. I love Fate. You know, I can really, you know, I've been doing this for a really long time. I think sort of the guideline is know your character sheet. I mean, like I can go to a con, and if Chris reads me the character sheet once, what's the easiest is if there are not tons and tons and tons of numbers.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because it's hard to hold. You know, I can hold the stats in my head pretty easily, but if I have to hold those 7 numbers and then 10 more numbers, that becomes really hard. But I can remember, you know, like, okay, my skills are this. We played something. It was the last. I think we played it with you, Mike.
Is it that crazy ass German RPG?
Yes.
I do. I remember it.
Oh, the Dark Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and I think the role playing was fun for me, but the dice part was when the rules become too crazy and complex. So that's what I want to stay away from.
Right.
But I do like to try new games. Champions can sometimes be a little bit. Chris is laughing. daunting. Why are you laughing, Chris?
That's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot of numbers.
So it's
a
interesting.
lot of numbers.
You and I know you and Chris, and I go to Chris. I have two friends, Chris and my friend James Grimmel, who are my Pathfinder guys, right? Like when I want to know what the hell's going on in the world of Pathfinder, there's the ones I hit up about it. And Pathfinder, I've always felt, is a very mechanics heavy RPG.
Now, see, I don't really have a problem.
Yeah.
With Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm not bashing it. It's
right. Sure.
I'm happy it's there. Yeah.
But I like. I didn't have a problem with. I didn't have a problem with the White Wolf games. Shadowrun. I could play. Pretty much, yeah, I would go with that rule that if there aren't tons and tons of numbers on the sheet, and if there are characteristics or a personality type, Chris just reads it to me. I have that in my head, and I'm very good to go.
And as you say, having 30 years of RPG experience, you're a lot of time you can gauge it and immediately tell what you're going to need to worry about with a game.
Absolutely, and I know what I can play too. Yeah. I mean, now that I've been doing it for so long, Chris and I sat down at a game, and it was a Star Wars type of game, and there were a bunch of characters, and there was like somebody that used the Force, a droid, a protocol. A protocol droid. I'm sorry, I reversed it. And then they said that there was a character sort of like Kaylee, and Chris put the character that was like Kaylee to the side. He goes, "I already know what you want."
Right.
And so he, I think we said that during another podcast, but we've been playing together now, I think, for as long as I've been 30 years. So yeah. He sort of knows what I like to play.
Right.
And,
right. That's great.
But it's also nice I can play by myself, but I just enjoy playing with my husband.
Sure. Yep. I'm the same way with Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I just remember when we played last year, that whole Red series of Pathfinder Adventures, D&D at Origins. When we had the private table.
Yeah.
Upstairs. Yeah. And because you asked which games were hard. That was a hard one, but not because I was blind.
Right. None of us had a particularly great time with that series.
So scripted. So yeah. I guess that's another thing is, scripted games.
Well, that brings up sort of that very example. I really felt like that whole series of adventures was built to throw quote unquote balanced or challenging encounters at people, and story be damned what's between them.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't like
the story I had in my head about the direction it was going to go was so much better than what actually happened.
So
are you kidding? You had the Red Wizards of Thay as potential villains, and you made it some hags.
Yeah,
hags in the basement that we never even heard of.
Right.
Ah!
It was so confusing.
It really was. That was too bad.
I don't know. I think, Mike, that you should write your own version of that, and then,
Of that adventure?
Yeah.
My docket's full. I got my own adventures to write. Sharon, this has been an absolutely wonderful time. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I bet the people that watched and will watch in the future have learned a lot.
Oh, I hope so.
Where can people find you? Where what would you like to pitch?
Our podcast, Dragon Reel.
Dragon Reel. Where can people find it? Is it on the iTunes?
It's on. Yes, it's on iTunes.
Dragon Reel with 2 E's.
Or Stitcher.
Or
DragonReel.com.
DragonReel.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
And can I just give it one more plug if it's for fantasy movies?
Please.
Yeah. So we're really into fantasy, and we talk about fantasy movies on the podcast.
Yeah, and it's okay that it's kind of okay that Chris didn't like the Excalibur.
My husband's insane. Who doesn't like Excalibur?
Doesn't like Excalibur.
That was That was another thing. If you were, he lied.
I can forgive that. Yeah.
He told me that he liked it.
Been together a long time. I can yeah, I can withstand that. Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for producing the show and getting everything together and wrangling the whole thing. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody on Twitch that came out to watch, and thanks to everybody that will watch and listen to it in the future. And that will end this episode of the DM's Deep Dive. Thank you all.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out and watching tonight. We'll be back streaming tomorrow night at 10:30 Eastern with Adventure Maiden, so make sure to check that out. Otherwise, have a great night, everyone.